All right, this is a 2000 and I think 6 or something, or Dodge Dakota. But anyway, what this has is a 45 RFE transmission in here. It has an input turbine speed sensor code. Now, this vehicle was driven down south, I think to Alabama, and a transmission went out, so they put a transmission in. They drove all the way up here, and now they have an input speed sensor code. So I am going to show you why it has this input speed sensor code. Okay, the input speed sensor is up to the front, and I want you to see right there. Do you see that? That's where it plugs in. Do you see what they did? They put a wire nut on there. They twisted it on with a wire nut. See, you know, that might work in a house, you know, when nothing is vibrating. But when you have a vehicle that's hitting bumps and vibrating, you don't put something on like that with wire nuts. That's not something you do. Now, I don't know if this is something they do down south. No, I know they don't. This is just whoever was down there that did it, that did a bad job. You know how to fix wires properly on vehicles, because I even show you how I do it, and it never will be this way. Now, there's a connector made for that, right here, where you can put it on properly. You got a pigtail here, and you have the connector. You have the connector, so, and they give you, I believe, they give you some shrink tubing or something to put it on, but you solder this part on, or you use the splicers and clip it in. So you do it the right way. You don't do something like that. You don't sit up here and wire, what's those things, wire nuts or something? You don't do that. You just don't do stuff like that. But there are people out there that will, okay? So I just want to show you this on this Dodge Dakota here. Alright, so here's this piece here. And you see how short those wires, and they tried to wire nut this on something this short. Ah, boy, that's terrible, terrible. Here's the right connector here. You can cut this off to whatever length, solder it in, or shrink, whatever you got to do. Use those shrink tubing, and then be finished. Do it right. You know, do it right. You know, I see all sorts of things. All sorts of things. Good thing he made it all the way up here. I think from here, from Ohio to Alabama is about 900 miles. Now, wouldn't this have been much better than those wire nuts trying to twist on here with these things here? You know, a new connector, putting it on, now you wouldn't have this issue. Okay, so please don't do that. Don't try to use stuff like that. I'm not against new innovative ways of doing things. A lot of times I have a lot of things that comes into the shop, and I see people have used their own inventive ways of doing things. I do stuff like that, but it has to be something solid. It has to be something that when people look at it, they say, well, that's a good job, you know, I can use that in the future. But this, I'll never use that, ever. It would have been better if they had just gone to the salvage yard, pulled off a connector, and twist tied it on and taped it. It would have held better, you know. All right, there we go. Nice connector. Make sure that they didn't do the same thing with the other sensor in the back. Let's see. No, in the back, I don't see. That sensor is fine. It's hard to see that thing. Where are you? Drive shaft. Can't see the sensor. Oh, there it is. Okay, that's fine. That is fine. They didn't wire nut that or whatever they did. Okay. Alright. Alright. There it goes. Right there. The new connector and harness. See, this is how you have to do it. You can't create problems. We already have enough problems as it is with all these electrical stuff. And then you go make a problem. Don't do that. Okay, this was a 05 Dodge Dakota. I think I said 06. Now let's see what that problem caused by simply messing up that circuit. Okay. All right, he got some evap codes in here. We're going to start with one. All right, evap. Okay. Okay, that's generic. Okay, gear ratio 2, incorrect ratio. Gear 4, incorrect ratio. There it is. Turbine input shaft speed sensor circuit. And gear 1, incorrect ratio. So what happens is, if the computer cannot determine what gear the transmission is in, then it's going to throw a gear ratio code. It uses sensors. I mean, just as their name says, it's a sensor. It senses things. It relays information back to the computer. The computer uses the turbine and the output shaft to see what gear it's in. And if it can't see that, then it doesn't know what gear it's in. So therefore, it throws gear ratio code. So when you get a gear ratio code, if you have an input turbine speed sensor problem, it's probably best to deal with that first. Now, if you just have a regular gear ratio code and the input turbine speed sensor is okay, then you probably have a problem with the transmission slipping. Now, I do know in the Dodge Caravans, it had a speed sensor code, but it had no reverse. And that's because the speed sensor was reading the reluctor that was not turning. So it threw that code too, but it also had no reverse. So I guess that's one of the only times when you don't deal with that. Okay, so this is a what is this? A 2005 Dodge Dakota. I'm going to clear these codes and then take it for a ride and see if everything is fine.